I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I never believed in fate. I never believed that one moment, one single heartbeat of a decision, could change everything. I thought that was something people said in movies, something writers invented to make us believe our ordinary lives could somehow become extraordinary. I was wrong. My heart stopped. Right there in that moment, my heart simply stopped. I was standing in a hospital room, wearing a wedding dress that cost more than I used to make in 5 years. My hands, the same hands that had scrubbed grease off diner plates, the same hands that had been cracked and calloused and invisible, were holding flowers worth more than my mother's funeral. And the most feared man in the city was looking at me like I was the only person in the world who had ever truly seen him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how I got here, you need to know where I started. You need to know about the night I saved a stranger's life in a back alley behind a rundown diner. You need to know about the woman who grabbed my flour-dusted hand and told me I was going to marry her son. You need to know about the man whose name made grown men tremble, who walked into my world and shattered every wall I'd ever built. You need to know about me. My name is Alina Vasquez. And this is the story of how I went from invisible to irreplaceable. The smell of burnt coffee and bacon grease, that's what I remember most about my life before. Sal's Diner sat on the corner of Bleecker and Fifth, in a part of the city most people pretended didn't exist. The neon sign flickered open, even though the O had burned out 3 years ago, so it just read pen like some kind of sad poetry. The vinyl booths were cracked and held together with duct tape. The linoleum was yellow in the places where it should have been white, worn through to concrete in the paths where thousands of feet had shuffled to and from the bathroom. I had worked there for 6 years. 6 years of smiling when I didn't feel like smiling. 6 years of yes, ma'am, and right away, sir, and pretending I didn't notice when customers looked right through me like I was part of the furniture. 6 years of doubles and triples, and covering shifts for coworkers who never bothered to return the favor. 6 years of barely surviving. You know that feeling when you're so tired that your bones ache? When you can't remember the last time you slept more than 4 hours? When you look in the mirror and don't recognize the woman staring back at you? That was my life. I was 27 years old, and I felt ancient. But I kept going. You want to know why? Because giving up wasn't an option. It never had been. Not when my mother got sick. Not when the medical bills piled up like an avalanche I could never outrun. Not when she slipped away from me at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday while I held her hand and promised her everything would be okay. That was 18 months ago. I was still paying off her debt, still working every shift Sal would give me, still telling myself that someday, somehow, things would get better. I just didn't believe it anymore. The night everything changed started like every other night. The dinner rush had finally slowed down around 9 p.m. My feet were screaming, my lower back felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to it, and I had exactly 3 hours left on my shift. I was refilling salt shakers, the most mind-numbing task imaginable, when I heard the commotion. It came from the alley behind the diner. Now, let me tell you something about that alley. It was the kind of place where smart people didn't go. The kind of place where the shadows seemed thicker, where the streetlights conveniently didn't work, where things happened that nobody talked about in the morning. I should have ignored it. Any reasonable person would have ignored it. But then I heard the scream. It was a woman's scream, high and terrified and cut off suddenly in a way that made my blood run cold. And I knew, in that instant, that I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard it. I grabbed the baseball bat Sal kept behind the counter. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Can you imagine? Me, 5'4", 120 pounds soaking wet, armed with a dented Louisville slugger, walking toward the kind of trouble that got people killed. But I did it anyway. I pushed through the back door, and what I saw made my stomach drop. There were 3 of them, 3 men in dark clothes, surrounding a woman who had been knocked to the ground. She was older, maybe late 60s, with silver hair that had come loose from an elegant twist. Even in the dim light, I could see she was wearing expensive clothes, a cashmere coat, designer shoes, a string of pearls around her neck. She was also bleeding from a cut on her forehead, and one of the men was reaching for her purse while another pulled out a knife. "Hey." The word left my mouth before I could stop it. All three men turned to look at me. I saw their faces, hard and cruel and amused, like they couldn't believe this skinny waitress in a stained apron was actually challenging them. "Walk away," one of them said. "This ain't your business." My knees were shaking. Every survival instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to go back inside, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I looked at that woman on the ground, at the fear in her eyes, at the blood running down her face. And I thought about my mother. I thought about how she had always told me that the measure of a person isn't what they do when it's easy. It's what they do when it's hard. "Let her go," I said. My voice didn't shake. I don't know how, but it didn't shake. One of the men laughed. He actually laughed. "You're gonna regret this, sweetheart." He came at me fast. But here's the thing about growing up the way I did. In the neighborhood I grew up in, you learn how to fight. Not the pretty kind of fighting you see in movies. The dirty, desperate, survival kind. The kind where you do whatever it takes to walk away breathing. I swung the bat. I connected with his shoulder, and he went down with a howl of pain. The second man came at me, and I ducked under his grab, driving my elbow into his stomach. The third man, the one with the knife, hesitated for just a second. That second was all I needed. I screamed, not a scared scream, a war cry, raw and primal, loud enough to wake the entire block. Lights started coming on in the apartments above. Someone shouted that they were calling the police. The men ran. They actually ran. I stood there in that alley, my chest heaving, the bat clutched in my white-knuckled hands, and I couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Then I heard the older woman's voice. My dear girl." I dropped the bat and rushed to her side. "Are you okay? We need to call an ambulance. That cut on your head." "I'm fine." She grabbed my hands, grabbed them tight, like she was afraid I would disappear. Her eyes were dark and sharp and shining with tears. "You saved my life. Do you understand that? You saved my life." "I did what anyone would do," I said. She shook her head slowly, and something in her expression made me pause. "No," she said softly. "No, you did what almost no one would do. You saw a stranger in danger and you risked everything." She reached up and touched my face, a gesture so tender, so maternal that my throat tightened. "What is your name?" "Elena Vasquez." She smiled. It was a beautiful smile, the kind that transformed her whole face, made her look decades younger. "Elena," she repeated. "I am Rosa DeLuca, and I am going to remember this night for the rest of my life." I didn't know who she was. I need you to understand that. When I helped Rosa to her feet, when I cleaned the cut on her forehead with napkins from the diner, when I made her a cup of tea and sat with her until the police arrived, I had no idea that she was the matriarch of the DeLuca family. I didn't know that her son controlled half the city. I didn't know that his name made politicians nervous and criminals respectful. I didn't know that Rosa DeLuca, the woman who was clutching my hand like I was her long-lost daughter, was the mother of Dante DeLuca, the most feared mafia boss on the eastern seaboard. The police came and went. They took my statement, looked vaguely impressed that I had chased off 3 attackers with a baseball bat, and told me to be more careful in the future. Rosa refused to go to the hospital, insisted that she was fine, that her son would send his personal physician. "My son," she said to me as she was leaving, "will want to meet you, to thank you personally." I smiled and nodded and assumed I would never see her again. Rich people moved in different worlds. They said things they didn't mean. They promised gratitude they never delivered. I went back to refilling salt shakers. He showed up the next day. I was in the middle of the lunch rush, balancing 4 plates of burgers on my arms, when the diner went quiet. You know that feeling when a room suddenly changes, when the energy shifts so dramatically that you can feel it in your skin. I turned around. And I saw him. Dante DeLuca was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from marble. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a year, and he moved with the kind of controlled grace that made you think of predators, panthers, wolves. But it was his eyes that stopped me. They were gray, not blue-gray or green-gray, but actual gray, like storm clouds, like steel, like something that could cut you if you got too close. And they were looking directly at me. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Recognition, like he already knew me, like he had been searching for me without realizing it. The plates I was holding suddenly felt very heavy. "Elena Vasquez," he said. His voice was low and controlled, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. Italian, maybe, or something else, something older. "That's me," I said. "Can I help you?" He stepped closer, and I became aware of the 2 men who had entered behind him, large and stone-faced and clearly bodyguards. The entire diner was watching, most of them with expressions that ranged from curious to terrified. "You saved my mother's life," Dante said. It wasn't a question. I helped her. Anyone would have. "No," the word was sharp, final. "Anyone would not have. 3 armed men in an alley at night, and you, a stranger with nothing to gain, you risked everything." He paused, and something flickered in those gray eyes. "My mother has spoken of nothing else. She has opinions about you." I didn't know what to say to that. "I don't want anything," I said quickly. "I didn't do it for a reward. Please thank her for me, but—" "She wants to see you." "What?" "My mother." His jaw tightened, like he was fighting some internal battle. "She insists. She wants you to come to dinner tomorrow night." I actually laughed. It burst out of me, unexpected and inappropriate, and I saw his eyes flash with something, surprise, maybe, or annoyance. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I can't just leave. I work double shifts. I have bills I can't take a night off for." "I'll compensate you," he said flatly. "Whatever you would have made, triple it." My cheeks flushed. "I'm not for sale." Something changed in his expression then. Something shifted. He looked at me, really looked like he was seeing me for the first time. Not the waitress. Not the woman who had saved his mother. Me. "No," he said slowly. "No, you're not, are you?" We stood there for a moment, caught in something I didn't understand. The diner was silent. The burgers on my arm were getting cold. And this man, this dangerous, powerful, impossible man, was looking at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "One dinner," he said finally. "My mother will not take no for an answer, and neither, I'm afraid, will I." I didn't want to go. Every instinct I had screamed that this was a bad idea. The DeLuca family was dangerous. Everyone knew that. They controlled businesses and politicians, and if the rumors were true, much worse. Getting involved with them was like playing with fire. Eventually, you were going to get burned. But Rosa DeLuca called me personally. She got my number from Sal, who, it turned out, was more than happy to cooperate when the DeLuca family came asking. And when I heard her voice on the phone, warm and hopeful and so genuinely grateful, I couldn't say no. "Please, Elena," she said. "Just one dinner. I want to thank you properly. I want to look into the eyes of the woman who gave me back my life." So I went. The DeLuca mansion was exactly what you would expect, sprawling and elegant and intimidating, set behind iron gates and surrounded by manicured gardens. I wore the nicest dress I owned, a simple black thing I had bought for my mother's funeral, and I felt completely out of place the moment I stepped through the door. But Rosa met me in the foyer with a warmth that made my throat tight. "Elena," she embraced me like we were old friends, like I was family. "You came, you actually came." She looked different than she had in the alley, composed and elegant, with her silver hair perfectly styled and her pearls replaced by a stunning emerald necklace. But her eyes were the same, warm and sharp and filled with an intensity that made me feel seen. "Of course I came," I said. "You asked." She pulled back and studied my face, and something in her expression softened. "You have kind eyes," she said. Honest eyes, I knew it the moment I saw you. She took my hand and began leading me through the house. Come, my son is being difficult as usual, but he will behave tonight. I have made that very clear. I was led into a dining room that was bigger than my entire apartment. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings, a table that could seat 20 people. Dante was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and when he turned to look at me, I felt that same strange jolt of electricity. Miss Vasquez, he said. Mr. DeLuca. Elena, please, call him Dante. Rosa waved her hand dismissively. We don't stand on ceremony in this house, not with family. I saw Dante's jaw tighten at the word family, but he didn't correct her. Dinner was strange. The food was incredible, courses I couldn't pronounce, wines that probably cost more than my monthly rent, but the conversation was what caught me off guard. Rosa asked me questions, not polite, surface-level questions, but real ones. Where was I from? What was my family like? What did I dream about when I was young? I found myself answering honestly. I told her about my mother, about her illness, about the years of caregiving, about holding her hand in that hospital room while the machines beeped slower and slower. I told her about the medical bills, about selling everything we owned, about working every shift I could just to stay above water. I told her things I hadn't told anyone. And she listened, really listened, with tears in her eyes and her hand pressed against her heart. Dante said very little during dinner. He watched. He observed. Those gray eyes tracked my every movement, my every word, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking. But when I mentioned my mother's death, I saw something flicker across his face. Pain. Recognition. Grief. My husband died 3 years ago, Rosa said softly. Cancer, it was. Brutal. The kind of death that steals everything before it finally takes the person you love. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm so sorry, I said. She squeezed my fingers. You understand, don't you? The weight of it, the guilt of surviving. The way you keep waiting for them to walk through the door and they never do. Yes, I whispered. I understand. After dinner, Rosa excused herself, a transparent attempt to leave me alone with Dante. I found myself standing on the terrace overlooking the gardens, a glass of wine I hadn't asked for in my hand, while Dante stood beside me in silence. You didn't have to do this, I said finally. The dinner, the thanks, I know you're just doing it for your mother. Am I? I turned to look at him. Aren't you? He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkness. When he spoke, his voice was different, lower, more raw. I have spent my entire life protecting her, he said. She is the only good thing in this family, the only pure thing, and I failed her. You didn't. I did. His hands tightened on the railing. She was attacked because of who I am, because of what I do. The men who came for her, they weren't random criminals. They were sending a message to me. My blood ran cold. What are you saying? He turned to face me, and in the moonlight, his features looked sharper, more dangerous. I'm saying that you didn't just save a stranger, Alina. You intervened in something much bigger, much more dangerous. His eyes searched my face. You should be afraid of me. I should have been. Any reasonable person would have been. But standing there, looking into those storm-gray eyes, I saw something beneath the power and the danger. I saw exhaustion. I saw loneliness. I saw a man carrying a weight he had never asked for. Are you trying to scare me away? I asked. I'm trying to warn you. Consider me warned. I took a sip of wine. Now tell me why you're really out here, talking to a waitress on your terrace instead of running your empire. His lips twitched, almost a smile. You're not like anyone I've ever met, he said. I'll take that as a compliment. It was intended as one. I thought that would be the end of it. One dinner, one strange, intense conversation. A story I would tell someday, when my life was less chaotic, about the time I saved a Mafia boss's mother and got invited to a mansion. But Rosa DeLuca had other plans. She started calling me, every day, sometimes twice a day. She wanted to know how I was doing, if I had eaten, if I was getting enough sleep. She sent food to the diner, elaborate meals from restaurants I couldn't afford, delivered by confused couriers who clearly didn't understand why they were bringing filet mignon to a place that served hash browns. And then she started showing up. The first time, she came for lunch. Sat in my section like it was the most normal thing in the world, ordered a grilled cheese sandwich, and left me a tip that was more than my weekly salary. "You can't keep doing this," I told her. "Doing what?" "This," I gestured around the diner. "Coming here, giving me money, I'm not a project." Her eyes softened. "Is that what you think this is? Charity?" "What else would it be?" She reached across the table and took both of my hands. Her grip was firm. Her gaze was fierce. "Alina, listen to me very carefully. When you walked into that alley, you didn't just save my life. You showed me something. You showed me that there are still people in this world who act with courage and compassion without expecting anything in return." She paused. "I have been surrounded by lies and manipulation for most of my life. My husband's world, my son's world, it is built on power and fear. And then you appeared. You, with your tired eyes and your brave heart, and your absolute refusal to be anything other than who you are." I didn't know what to say. "I am not trying to buy you," she continued. "I am trying to love you the way I would love a daughter if God had blessed me with one." Her voice cracked. "Dante is my only child, and I love him more than my own life, but he has never let anyone close, not truly, not since his father started grooming him for this life." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see the way he looks at you." She smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. "I see the way his walls crack just a little when you're in the room, and I hope, that maybe you could be the one to reach him. If you're still with me, thank you. This story means everything to me, and I hope it means something to you too. Hit that like button if you're feeling what I felt. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe because what happened next changed everything. I mean everything." I tried to stay away. For 2 weeks, I declined Rosa's invitations, dodged her phone calls, threw myself into work with a desperation that bordered on obsession. I picked up extra shifts. I volunteered for inventory duty. I did anything, everything, to keep myself too busy to think about Dante DeLuca and his storm gray eyes. But the universe had other plans. It was a Thursday night late, around 11 p.m., when the black SUV pulled up outside the diner. I watched through the window as Dante stepped out, his face set in hard lines, his movements sharp with urgency. He walked in like he owned the place. "We need to talk," he said. "I'm working." "This can't wait." He looked at Sal, who immediately found somewhere else to be. "Please, Alina, it's about my mother." My heart clenched. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's fine for now." He pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for me to do the same. When I hesitated, he added more softly, "Please." I sat. "The men who attacked her," Dante said. "They belong to a rival family, the Mortys. We've been in conflict for years, territorial disputes, business disagreements, the usual power struggles. But recently, things have escalated." "Escalated how?" "They've made it clear that they intend to use my mother to get to me." His jaw clenched. "I've increased security. I've moved her to a safe house. I've done everything I can, but they're persistent, and they're dangerous." I felt cold. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because they know about you." His eyes met mine, and I saw fear there, real, genuine fear. "They know what you did. They know you saved her, and now they see you as a target." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. That's not possible. I'm nobody. I'm a waitress." "You're the woman who made their plan fail. You're the woman who cost them their leverage." He leaned forward, his voice intense. "Alina, I need you to understand these are not people who forgive. They don't forget, and they will use you to hurt my mother or to hurt me." My hands were shaking. I could feel every callus, every crack, every reminder of what I had survived. "What do you want me to do?" "Come stay at the house. Let me protect you." "Absolutely not." "Alina." "No." I stood up, my chair scraping back. I am not going to hide in your mansion like some kind of princess in a tower. I have a life. I have a job. I have. You have nothing that can't be rebuilt, he said flatly. But you only have one life, and if they take it, there is no coming back. The words hit me like a slap. That was cruel, I whispered. It was honest. He stood and moved closer, and I became aware of how small the diner suddenly felt. I am not asking you to give up your independence. I am not asking you to be something you're not. I am asking you to let me keep you alive. And what do you get out of it? He stopped. For a moment, he looked genuinely surprised by the question. What do I get? Everyone wants something. Your whole world is built on transactions and leverage. So what do you get if I agree to this? He was quiet for a long moment. Peace, he said finally. I get peace, knowing that you're safe, knowing that my mother is safe. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, stripped of its usual control. I have done terrible things, Alina, things that would make you hate me if you knew, but I am not willing to let you die for the crime of showing kindness. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I saw past the power and the danger. I saw a man who was drowning. I agreed to stay at the house. But I had conditions. I'm not giving up my job, I said. I'll cut back on shifts, but I'm not disappearing. And I'm not going to be followed around by bodyguards every second of the day. I need to be able to breathe. Dante looked like he wanted to argue, but Rosa intervened. She stays with us, Rosa said firmly. But we respect her boundaries. That's the only way this works. And so, that's how I found myself moving into a guest room in the DeLuca mansion. It was surreal. The room alone was bigger than my entire apartment. The bed had more pillows than I knew what to do with. The bathroom had a tub I could practically swim in and products with names I couldn't pronounce. But the strangest part was how quickly it started to feel normal. Rosa and I fell into a routine. Morning coffee in the garden. Long conversations about everything and nothing. Our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. She told me about her husband, about falling in love with a man she knew was dangerous, about the choices she made and the ones she regretted. And I told her things I had never told anyone. About my father leaving when I was 6. About my mother working 3 jobs to keep us fed. About the years I spent taking care of her, watching her fade, knowing there was nothing I could do. Rosa held me when I cried. She stroked my hair and whispered that I wasn't alone anymore. And somewhere along the way, I started to believe her. Dante was a different story. He kept his distance at first. Polite, professional, the dutiful son who checked in on his mother, discussed business with his lieutenants, and disappeared into his study for hours at a time. But I noticed him watching me. At dinner, his eyes would track my movements. In the garden, I would look up and find him at the window, his expression unreadable. And sometimes, late at night, I would hear him packing in the hallway outside my room. One night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to get water and found him sitting alone in the dark living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at nothing. Couldn't sleep, I asked. He looked up, and I saw exhaustion in every line of his face. I rarely sleep, he said. Occupational hazard. I sat down across from him. Want to talk about it? No. Okay. We sat in silence for a while. The clock ticked. The house creaked around us. How do you do it? He asked suddenly. Do what? Stay kind. He looked at me, and there was something desperate in his eyes. You've lost everything, your mother, your security. Your normal life, and yet you're still warm, still open. How? I thought about the question. Because the alternative is worse, I said finally. Becoming hard, becoming closed off, that's another kind of death. A slower one, and I didn't survive everything. I survived just to stop living. He was quiet for a long moment. My father used to say that kindness was weakness, he said. That this world would chew you up and spit you out if you let yourself feel. He taught me to be cold, to be calculating, to put the family above everything. And what do you think? I think he was wrong. He set down his glass. I think he was desperately, tragically wrong, but I don't know how to be anything else. I moved to sit beside him on the couch. Not too close, just close enough. You could learn, I said softly. It's not too late. He turned to look at me, and something shifted in the air between us. You make me want to be different, he said. That terrifies me. Why? Because different in my world gets you killed. He paused. Or worse, it gets the people you care about killed. I understood then. I understood why he kept everyone at arm's length, why he buried himself in work and strategy and the cold calculus of power. It wasn't that he didn't feel. It was that he felt too much, and every feeling was a vulnerability. Every attachment was a weakness his enemies could exploit. Dante, I said, you can't protect everyone by never letting anyone in. I can try. And you'll be miserable. I'm already miserable. The words hung in the air. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw the boy he must have been before this life claimed him. Lost, lonely, desperate for connection but terrified of the cost. I reached out and took his hand. He flinched like I had burned him. It's okay, I whispered. It's just me. Slowly, tentatively, his fingers closed around mine. And we sat there in the darkness, holding hands, while the world outside continued to burn. The attack came 3 weeks later. I should have seen it coming. The tension had been building, whispered conversations between Dante and his men, increased security, Rosa being confined to the house more and more often. But I had been lulled into a false sense of safety. The mansion felt impenetrable. The guards felt omnipresent. I was wrong. It happened on a Tuesday. Rosa and I were in the garden, as we often were in the afternoons. She was teaching me about roses, the different varieties, how to prune them, how to encourage them to bloom. It was peaceful, normal. And then the world exploded. I don't remember the exact sequence of events. I remember the sound, a deafening boom that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I remember glass shattering. I remember Rosa screaming my name. And then I remember hands grabbing me, dragging me backward, a cloth pressed against my face that smelled sickly sweet. Everything went dark. I woke up in a warehouse. My head was pounding. My wrists were bound behind my back, and I was very, very aware that I was not alone. She's awake. The voice came from somewhere to my left. I forced my eyes open and saw 3 men standing over me, hard-faced, cold-eyed, with the kind of casual cruelty that made my stomach turn. Where am I? I managed. Somewhere your boyfriend can't find you. One of the men crouched down to my level. At least, not before we have some fun. I don't have a boyfriend. He laughed. The DeLuca prince, keeping you in his house, protecting you like you're precious. He grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. We've been watching. We know everything. My mind was racing. Rosa. Where was Rosa? The old woman, I said. Where is she? Safe for now. He released my chin and stood. She's insurance, just like you. When Dante comes for you, and he will be ready. Fear clawed at my throat, but I forced myself to think, to breathe, to stay calm. He won't come, I said. I'm nobody, just a waitress who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then why did he move heaven and earth to bring you into his home? The man smiled, and it was a terrible thing. Why does his mother treat you like a daughter? Why does the great Dante DeLuca look at you like you're the only thing in this world that matters? I didn't have an answer for that. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. I lost track of time in that warehouse, with its flickering lights and its damp concrete and its smell of rust and oil. They didn't hurt me, not physically, but they made sure I knew what was coming. They talked about it in front of me, what they would do to Dante when he arrived, how they would make him watch, how they would tear apart everything he had built. And they talked about Rosa. She was being held somewhere else, they said. Another location, another piece of leverage. I felt helpless. For the first time in my life, I truly felt helpless. I thought about my mother, about how she had fought so hard, for so long, only to lose in the end. I thought about all the times I had told myself that I was strong, that I was a survivor, that nothing could break me. This might break me. The rescue came on what I think was the second night. I was drifting in and out of consciousness when I heard it, shouting, gunfire, the sounds of chaos. My captors scrambled, reaching for weapons, but it was too late. The door burst open, and Dante walked through. He was not the man I knew, not the controlled, calculating businessman, not the dutiful son who deferred to his mother. This was something else, something primal and terrifying and absolutely devastating. He moved through the warehouse like death itself. I watched, my vision blurry, as he took down my captors one by one. Efficient, brutal, final. There was no hesitation, no mercy, no moment of doubt. And then he was in front of me, his hands gentle as he cut through my bindings, his voice rough with emotion. Elena, look at me." I looked. His face was streaked with dirt and blood. His eyes were wild with fear and relief, and something else I couldn't name. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "Did they touch you? Did they?" "I'm okay," I whispered. "I'm okay." He pulled me into his arms. It was not a gentle embrace. It was desperate, crushing, the kind of hug that says, "I thought I lost you. I thought I lost you and I couldn't breathe." "I found you," he said against my hair. "I found you." Later, I would learn what he had done. To find me, Dante had called in every favor, burned every bridge, crossed every line. He had walked into Morty territory alone, and demanded information at gunpoint. He had made promises he would have to keep, deals that would cost him dearly, enemies he would spend years fighting. All for me. "You shouldn't have done that," I told him later, in the hospital where they were checking me for injuries. "You shouldn't have risked everything. I'm not worth." "Don't," his voice was sharp. "Don't ever say that." "But you are worth everything." He took my hands, and I saw that his were shaking. "Do you understand me? Everything. The empire, the power, the legacy, none of it means anything if you're not safe." I stared at him. "Dante, that's insane." "Probably," he almost smiled, "but it's also true." Rosa appeared then, rushing into my hospital room with tears streaming down her face. She had been rescued separately, by another team, and she looked shaken but unharmed. "My girl," she sobbed, pulling me into her arms. "My brave, beautiful girl." And standing there, surrounded by these two people who had somehow become my family, I felt something crack inside me. All the walls I had built, all the armor I had worn, all the careful distance I had maintained. It all came crumbling down. The weeks after the rescue were a blur. There were doctors and police reports and endless conversations with lawyers. The Morty family had been dealt a significant blow, but they weren't gone, not completely. The threat was diminished, not eliminated. But something had changed. I had changed. Or maybe I had finally stopped pretending to be something I wasn't. I moved into the mansion permanently, not as a guest, but as family. Rosa insisted, Dante agreed, and I discovered that I didn't want to argue anymore. The diner felt like a different life, a life that belonged to someone else. Sal understood. He cried a little when I told him I was leaving, but he also looked relieved. "You deserve better than this place," he said. "You always did." Dante and I didn't rush into anything. We were both too damaged for that, too aware of how easily things could fall apart. But slowly, gradually, we found our way to each other. Late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. Walks in the garden where our hands would brush and neither of us would pull away. Moments of vulnerability that cracked us both open. He told me about his father. About the training that started when he was just a boy. About the first time he was ordered to do something terrible and the way it had hollowed him out. About the years of becoming someone he hated because the alternative was losing everything. And I told him about my mother. About the guilt I still carried. About the dreams where she was still alive, where I woke up reaching for her. About the way grief lived in my bones like a second skeleton. We held each other's pain. And somehow, in the holding, it became lighter. 6 months after the rescue, Dante asked me to marry him. It wasn't romantic, not in the traditional sense. We were in the kitchen at 2 a.m., both of us sleepless, eating leftover pasta out of the same container. I was wearing an old t-shirt and no makeup. He was in sweatpants and looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Marry me," he said. I almost choked on a noodle. "What?" "Marry me." He set down his fork and looked at me, and those storm-gray eyes were completely serious. "I know this isn't how it's supposed to go. I know I'm supposed to plan something grand, flowers and rings and whatever else people do. But I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of pretending I don't want you with every fiber of my being." My heart was pounding. "Dante, you don't have to say yes right now. You don't have to say yes ever. But I need you to know that I love you. That I have loved you since the moment you walked into that diner and looked at me like I was just a man, not a monster." I stared at him. "You're proposing with marinara sauce on your chin," I said. He reached up, wiped his face, and almost smiled. "Is that a no?" "It's not a no. Is it a yes?" I put down my fork. I crossed the kitchen to where he was sitting. I took his face in my hands, this face that had terrified so many people, this face that softened only when he looked at me. "It's a yes," I said. "It's always been a yes." The wedding was everything, and nothing I had ever imagined. Rosa planned most of it. She threw herself into the details with an energy that put people half her age to shame. The dress was custom-made, ivory silk with delicate lace that made me feel like something out of a fairy tale. The venue was the mansion's garden, transformed into a wonderland of flowers and lights. But the most beautiful moment wasn't the ceremony itself. It was before. I was in my room, putting on the finishing touches, when Rosa came in. She was wearing a beautiful dove-gray dress, and her eyes were shining with tears. "I have something for you," she said. She opened a velvet box to reveal a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a single pearl pendant. "This belonged to my mother," she said. "She gave it to me on my wedding day. She told me it represented the tears of joy and sorrow that make up a life, transformed into something beautiful." She clasped it around my neck. "I never had a daughter to give it to," she said softly. "Until now." I broke down crying. She held me while I sobbed, ruining my makeup, not caring at all. "You are my daughter," she said. "From the moment you walked into that alley, you were my daughter. I knew it. I knew it in my bones." "I love you," I managed. "I love you so much." "I love you too, my Alina. Now dry your tears." She smiled through her own. "You have a man waiting for you who looks like he might pass out if you don't get down there soon." Walking down that aisle, I thought about everything that had led me here. The years of struggle, the loss, the grief, the nights I thought I couldn't go on. And I understood something. All of it, every painful, broken piece, had been necessary. Not because suffering is noble or loss is beautiful, but because it had made me who I was. It had given me the strength to walk into a dark alley with a baseball bat. It had given me the courage to see a dangerous man as human. It had given me the capacity to love Rosa and to let myself be loved in return. The same hands that once scrubbed floors were now signing documents that would change everything. Dante was waiting at the end of the aisle. He was wearing a black suit, looking every inch the powerful man he was, but his eyes were red-rimmed. And when I reached him, when I took his hands, I felt them trembling. "You came," he whispered. "I'll always come," I said. "The nursery is finished." I'm standing in the doorway, looking at the soft yellow walls, the white crib, the rocking chair Rosa insisted on buying even though there are already 3 rocking chairs in this house. My hand is resting on my stomach, on the small but unmistakable curve that contains our future. Dante comes up behind me, wraps his arms around my waist, rests his chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asks. "Everything." "That's specific." I smile. I'm thinking about my mom, about how much she would have loved this. Loved you, loved Rosa, loved the idea of becoming a grandmother. His arms tighten around me. "She knows," he says softly. "Wherever she is, she knows, and she's proud of you." I turn in his arms to face him. Do you really believe that? I believe that love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It becomes something we carry with us always. He touches my face. She's here, Alina, in the woman you've become, in the life you're building, in the child we're going to raise. My eyes fill with tears. When did you get so wise? I learned from this woman I know. She walked into my life with a baseball bat and completely ruined my ability to be cold and calculating. He kisses my forehead. Worst thing that ever happened to me. Liar. Best thing, he admits. The best thing. So that's my story. The story of how I went from invisible to irreplaceable. From a waitress serving coffee to a woman building a life I never could have imagined. From someone who had lost everything to someone who found a family in the most unexpected place. I saved a stranger in an alley, and she claimed me as her daughter. Her son looked at me like I was worth fighting for, and somewhere along the way, I started to believe him. I'm not going to pretend it was easy. The transition from poor to privileged, from outsider to family, it came with its own challenges. There were moments of doubt, of imposter syndrome so intense I couldn't breathe. There were nights I woke up convinced this was all a dream, that I would open my eyes and be back in my tiny apartment, surrounded by bills I couldn't pay. But those moments passed. They always pass. And now, standing here in this nursery, watching the afternoon light stream through the windows, I understand something that took me far too long to learn. Your worth is not determined by your circumstances. You are not your job. You are not your bank account. You are not the things you own or the people who failed to love you. You are what you do when no one is watching. You are the choices you make when it would be easier to look away. You are the love you give, even when you have every reason to be cold. That's what Rosa saw in me that night in the alley. That's what Dante fell in love with. That's what I finally learned to see in myself. And now I want to hear your story. Have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever been overlooked, underestimated, made to feel like you didn't matter? Have you ever taken a risk that terrified you, stepped into the unknown because it was the right thing to do? Have you ever found family in the most unexpected places? People who saw you, really saw you, for who you are? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Because your story matters, you matter. You might be in your diner phase right now, working too hard, sleeping too little, wondering if this is all there is. You might be carrying grief you haven't processed, wearing armor you don't know how to take off, telling yourself that you're fine when you're barely surviving. I see you. And I want you to know that your alley moment is coming. That chance to be brave, to be kind, to change everything. It might not look the way you expect. It probably won't, but it's coming. And when it does, don't hesitate. Walk through that door. Swing that bat. Save that stranger. Because you never know whose life you're about to change, including your own. If this video touched your heart, please like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. I wish you love. I wish you courage. I wish you the strength to be seen. Until next time.